We're so excited tonight to have Mini Timmaraju. She is the president of Reproductive Freedom for All. And on this great night for women, we're going to introduce her in just a minute. I know, so exciting. Who knew that it would be another incredibly well-themed night to have a champion of women's health and a champion of women's rights on our show tonight. So we'll let a few more folks stroll in before we get started, folks. But tonight we're talking about a really important topic. And in my Substack column this morning, I really just wanted to hit it hard with the fact that we are kind of tucking under the rug again women's rights, and we can't continue to do that. But as luck would have it, when I wrote it yesterday, I didn't know how things would land. But women are back in the forefront today, I would say. And Minnie and I will talk about that. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about and make her blush a little bit. Mini Timmaraju, she is the president of a wonderful organization formerly known as NARAL. And NARAL, I worked closely with NARAL for many years, so couldn't have been more excited to see her become the president of what is now known as Reproductive Freedom for All. It's just a great advocacy organization for abortion care and women's rights. And they're just doing an amazing job. But let me tell you a little bit about Minnie. So Minnie came on the job about 4 years ago and immediately came into some legislative and some judicial decisions that were really upsetting. And we'll talk about that out of the gate probably. And I'm going to have her take you through the trajectory. But Minnie has a background. She's an amazing background for this, right? She's an attorney. She spent time in the Obama White House working on many things having to do with gender justice. She's been a community organizer. She really understands reproductive freedom. And with that, I'll introduce my friend, Mini Timmaraju, the president of Reproductive Freedom for All. Welcome.
It's so good to see you. It's so good to be with you. Thank you for having me. And thank you to this amazing community you've cultivated online. It's awesome to see how you've taken your public service to this new space. And it's really awesome for all of us who've supported you and who've supported your work to see this platform thrive.
Wow.
So thanks for having me.
As you know, we were before everybody came on, folks. I just want to let you know. By the way, it's Marie Newman. Hello, everybody. Chatting with Minnie. Sometimes I forget to introduce myself. In any event, Minnie and I were chatting about the honor it is to do advocacy work. It is really an honor and a pleasure, and gives me great joy. So in some ways, for me, it's a little bit selfish because I really enjoy doing the work of helping people understand difficult issues and then also advocating. So let's start with the top of the box, right? So Minnie, what's your take on last night? 2 new female governors, the first ever female Muslim statewide elected. It was a good night. So let me get your take.
Yeah, so Virginia, we can start with Virginia. We could not only have a woman governor and the first, Abigail Spanberger and Ghazala Hashmi, we have a trifecta in the state. We have the AG. We have both chambers. We picked up so many seats in so many tough parts of Virginia. I mean, it was a thorough sweep. And, next up in Virginia is going to be, an effort for a constitutional amendment to protect abortion care. And so having this trifecta is really going to allow us to really solidify abortion rights in the last Southern state to have abortion rights. So when you look at the country and you look at the map, Virginia is the last Southern state where folks can go and have access to care.
Yeah.
So this was a huge issue in the election. It was part of Abigail's closing argument. It was a through line for all the candidates. And
Right.
Virginians, more than anyone, understood that reproductive freedom was like on the ballot.
Right.
And, you may remember 2 years ago in 2023, Glenn Youngkin tried to make this an issue by moving a 15-week ban on abortion and calling it a compromise.
I do recall. Yeah.
And Virginia voters were not having it. They were like, no, that's a ban. So Virginia voters are primed. They understood. They're used to this issue. So this was a huge win for Democrats and for women, but it was also to me, important to underscore that abortion continues to be salient,
Yeah.
continues to be a driver, and continues to be an issue that brings Republicans and independents back over to our side because they want this freedom protected. So that's Virginia. New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill, to the last minute, we were all worried it was going to be a lot tighter than it should be.
Yeah.
She really pulled it out. I spent some time on the ground with her in her campaign,
Yeah.
and the enthusiasm levels were incredibly high. I think Mikey's just I think Mikey and
Yeah. No,
Abigail from
Mikey and I served
Congress.
together. Yeah. She's amazing. So is Abigail. Yeah.
They're so charismatic, they're so powerful,
Yeah.
as candidates, but they were also just damn hard workers,
Yeah.
right? Like, the number of doors knocked, the number of hours logged, like, they were everywhere, they were talking to everyone. But I think, again, Mikey was able to really draw the contrast, between herself and, Jack Ciattarelli,
Yeah.
and the Trump phenomenon, I think, and what's happening with federal workers, with government contracts, with the shutdown, with air traffic controllers, it really did resonate in both Virginia and New Jersey. Abortion
I'm
was a
sure.
driver
I'm sure.
in New Jersey, but that was like a bigger what's happened is Trump's failures, whether it's the Epstein files, whether it's the government shutdown, um, these ICE raids, they opened up the door for a conversation for us as reproductive freedom like advocates to go back to his voters and say, he lied to you. He said he was going to leave abortion to the states. He said he was going to address the cost of eggs. He said he was going to do XYZ. He's not doing any of that. How can you trust him? And it allows us to move some of them back to our column.
Right.
So it's been really, exciting to watch, what we've known all along happen in real time with the right candidates and the right investment, the right messaging and
Right.
the infrastructure, right? So many resources were poured into the states. We spent 5 million in this cycle, which is the first time we've ever spent that much in
Wow.
a non-midterm and non-presidential year. And that included the campaigns in Pennsylvania where we had the state Supreme Court retention races all about abortion. That
Yeah.
was very much an abortion referendum,
Yeah.
because Pennsylvanians know if we don't control that Supreme Court, much like other Supreme Court races in the country, like Wisconsin, that
Mhm.
their rights are, on the line. And then Prop 50 was in many ways an abortion election too, because if we don't win those seats back and we don't have a fair fight in Congress, we lose the fight against a national abortion ban that we know, Mike Johnson wants and is
Mhm.
fighting every day to get. So for us, it was a reproductive freedom election. It was
Yeah.
a huge win.
Yeah.
We didn't play in New York because we're not, we don't work on mayor races and down ballot and play in New York City. But
Right.
I will say, as an observer, as a fellow South Asian American, as a person married to someone who spent 30 years in New York City,
Yeah.
it's a very exciting race to watch. And I think the Mamdani race is a really great we're gonna be dissecting it for a while, right? We're gonna be learning from it, like,
Yeah.
the
I hope
power of
we do. I hope we
organizing.
learn from it. Yeah.
I think so, the power to me, it was about the power of organizing,
Mhm.
like, 100,000 volunteers hitting, like, 3,000,000 voter contacts. Like,
Amazing.
that's
Amazing.
wild, but I hope it makes some of our donor class understand we have to reinvest in organizing.
Yeah.
You have to what he did
Makes
was
a
he
difference.
talked to people where they are on digital, on social, and on the ground,
Yeah.
not on television, right? He wasn't, I mean, right in the biggest media market in the world.
Yeah.
So, but the through line, I think, again, was fundamental freedoms, opposition to Trump and the disaster he's been, and frankly, affordability and directly addressing costs in every single one of these races in these states. These candidates who were successful were aligning themselves with freedom, and they were talking about how they were gonna tackle, untenable rising cost of living for Americans.
What I absolutely loved is that each candidate did it in a very different way. And this is
Yes.
where I laughed so hard because I'm watching all the pundits this morning saying, "Oh, if they all talked about affordability, but just in a different way that was appropriate for their constituency." And you and I, people that are Democratic strategists, are like, I said that the day after the 24 election, like, for God's sakes, like, I just crack up so much at these pundits that haven't, and many have not talked to a voter in 20 years. And I can say that about a couple of our Democratic leaders too, but I'll stick on pundits for a while. But it is so ridiculous. But to that end, I'd love for you to remind our audience of the
Yeah.
degradation of women's rights over the last 5 years, and interject the Dobbs decision and the importance on reproductive freedom, and then some of these, if you can typify some of these crazy bills that are in the states that have really chewed and taken huge chunks out of our freedom. So I'm going to turn it over to you to just give us a quick timeline on some of the big ones.
Yeah. I mean, I can go all the way back and do a very quick overview. Roe v. Wade became law of the land in 1973.
Yep.
Um, what folks have to understand is the United States was very much like it is now. It was left to the states. It was a patchwork,
Yep.
mostly extreme restrictions and a lot of cultural stigma. Right, um, folks having to go to hospital boards to get permission to have abortions. Folks
Right.
having to go to Mexico. Folks having back alley abortions, etc. So the next big flashpoint becomes like Planned Parenthood v. Casey in the early '90s, which allowed for what we call, trap laws, targeted restrictions against abortion providers. So it changed the standard, and it allowed states to pass, really problematic restrictions to
Mhm.
make it harder for folks to get access to care. And that's
Right.
really when I think our movement started really grappling with, is a right enough? Like, if you don't have access to care and you have a constitutional right, does that really allow us to have freedom, right? And that's important because we're all the way back to that right now, and I think that's
Oh
just
my gosh.
important to remember, like, that's been the debate. So, things like, my home state of Texas, where I was a lobbyist for Planned Parenthood in the state legislature when a lot of these things happened. It was, corporate separation. That's when the abortion planning, like for Planned Parenthood, the abortion clinic had to be a separate legal entity from the family planning clinic. There's no rational reason for that except to make it more expensive for those clinics to exist.
And more difficult.
Um,
Yeah.
72-hour waiting periods between getting your ultrasound and making a decision about abortion, being read misinformation from your doctor that doctors would have to read, and they couldn't say this is actually medically inaccurate, talking about, fetal heartbeats or the ability for a fetus to feel pain. These are all like ways that they were able to whittle away at your ability to access. This meant, clinics were shutting down, doctors were being intimidated. Um, you name it. This is sort of the range of all the types of intimidation, and persecution, honestly, of abortion providers in this country, culminating, I think, in the murder of um, Dr. Tiller,
Yeah.
in Kansas, who famously got shot in his church by an anti-abortion activist, culminating a lot of great work members of Congress did, passing the FACE Act, protecting clinics from care. And that's important because one of the things Trump did immediately was get rid of the FACE Act, stop enforcing the FACE Act, pardoning protesters who violated the FACE Act. It's important, right? Because these are the little things that Trump's doing that are harkening back to those trap laws, even though he said he was going to leave it to the states. So all of this is going on. There have been multiple cases that have made their way through the Supreme Court. But we knew the minute that Hillary Clinton lost in 2016, that we were going to have a really big fight for the future of the Supreme Court, right?
Mhm.
And we were correct. Everything, I worked for Hillary Clinton in 2016. I was her women's vote director. Every single thing she warned about with regard to the court happened, again, culminating in the big fight around Kavanaugh. And
Right.
you talked about deprivation of women. I mean, it was for those of us who were old enough to have lived through Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill, it
Mm.
was like even worse, right? Flashbacks. And my predecessor, Elise, and the team at NARAL really like led that charge to fight Kavanaugh
They
and
did.
stop Kavanaugh. Did really incredible work, really increased engagement and awareness around the courts, which we continue to do a lot of work now around the courts. But as we all know, we lost that. And then Amy Coney Barrett, and now we're here, right? So the anti-abortion movement had been bringing, litigation and lawsuits against abortion providers for decades in the run-up to this moment. And the anti-abortion movement, along with the Heritage Foundation, along with a lot of dark money, Leonard Leo, they've really over time captured the federal courts. They've captured the Supreme Court. So this was their moment to strike. So it wasn't a surprise as It wasn't a surprise that shortly after Amy Coney Barrett um, made it to the bench that we saw the Dobbs case start, working its way through. And that was a case in Mississippi about the last abortion clinic in the state that provided care up to 15 weeks. And, it made its way to the court. I started my job 2 weeks before the oral arguments in the Dobbs case at the Supreme Court. So that was like the fall of 2021. The leak happened in 2022, a month before the decision. Folks remember that, it was like pure chaos. Um, but what was most alarming, well, there's so many things that are alarming, but we really were prepared for the court to do something more subtle. For the court, we knew that we had a believability gap in this country. Like you, me, activists have been shouting since Casey, prior to Casey, that Roe was under threat. Roe was under threat. Hillary Clinton's, we're going to lose Roe. This is what's going to happen. We still knew from public polling that Americans didn't understand that they thought, how can you take away a fundamental freedom? How can you take away a constitutionally protected right?
Right.
This is
Well,
important.
further, there are people, because I remember this when I was knocking on doors, that
Yes,
thought Roe v. Wade was actually a statute, not a ruling. Like,
that's right. So how could
yeah,
it, right? This is a right that I
yeah.
was born with. Like it could never be taken away.
Mhm.
So this is important because as we were going, we were expecting the court to just uphold the 15-week ban or to uphold, like, to take some sort of moderate middle ground.
Mhm.
And we were concerned, moderate's not the right word, but we were concerned that we would have a really hard time communicating to the American people that this is actually a national abortion ban.
Mhm.
Because as we know, this would allow the trap laws to get even more turbocharged,
Yeah.
right? And it would be bullshit that you actually have 15 weeks, right? So we were like, "Oh god, this is the direction this is gonna go." We were preparing for this. We were preparing for, like, a ton of massive public education, like,
Mhm.
on what this would mean to go from the Roe standard to the Mississippi standard. And then the leak happened, and it was like and then the decision, and they very clearly stated that they overturned Roe v. Wade, despite everything they said to the Senate Judiciary Committee, despite all of um their on under oath testimony that they would uphold the standard.
Yep.
They flat out disregarded and perjured themselves, really, quite frankly. Um, and look, since then, fast forward, we've had 21 states, 12 states with like full bans, like more states with extreme restrictions that are really limiting and have made, and a couple of states with a lot of fluidity about ballot measures have passed, but they're not being enforced, fights in the courts, etc. But 21 states where abortion access has been banned or severely restricted.
Right.
And since then, I think about 10 states since 2022 have passed ballot measures to protect abortion rights.
Mhm.
Um, and every time abortion's on the ballot, abortion wins. Abortion is more
Mhm.
popular than any political party. People desperately want this freedom, and that includes Republicans and independents in places like Kansas and Ohio and Missouri. So, now in this moment today, you know, on the anniversary of the Dobbs decision earlier this year, there was data published that showed that despite Dobbs,
Mhm.
abortion rates in this country have gone up
Yeah.
because telemedicine, medication abortion, things the Biden administration had done to make it easier to get medication abortion and to protect abortion patients.
Yeah.
Um, Things that activists had worked for years to protect and expand access to medication abortion and telemedicine. Things that happened during the pandemic that allowed for more telemed care for folks to get. So we are now in a moment where the new battle, the new frontier, first of all, the federal battle will continue. We have to win back the House. We have to win back a federal trifecta. But in the meantime, the state by state battle and the other federal battle is, medication abortion, expanding shield laws to protect providers and patients.
Yeah.
Thinking about the case in New York with Dr. Maggie Carpenter, where Texas keeps trying to, you know, extradite her
Yeah.
to Texas
Yeah.
and prosecute her under Texas law, and Kathy
Yeah.
Hochul is like, "Absolutely not,"
Yeah.
and the New York legislature is like, "Absolutely not." So
Yeah.
this has changed the entire dynamic, right? Meanwhile, Trump and his cronies, RFK Jr., Marty McCary at the FDA, Pam Bondi, have never had any intention of leaving this to the states and are trying to find ways to reverse authorization of medication abortion limit the restriction, create more restrictions on how you can access medication abortion, like removing the ability to access it by mail,
Right.
which would have devastating consequences because over 50% of all abortions in this country are done by medication abortion in states like the one you're in right now.
Yep.
Your governor and your state's done incredible work to protect medication abortion and providers. So this is where we're at. We're in this like state by state fight. We're in a segregated society. I live in Texas. I don't have these rights, but I live in Maryland. I do have these rights. And it's become, more than a culture war, which is what folks have called it was never a culture war, but
Yep.
it's clearly more than that now.
Yeah.
You can't debate it. It's about our fundamental right to exist. Um, and I think the fact that we're in this fractured society, Marie, is what's really making it more salient.
Right.
Every day that we have these abortion bans in place, every day we have these horror stories about women dying in Georgia, in Texas, people understand that it could happen to them and that they're just one bad election away from it happening to them.
It's so right. And let me just tether together a few things for our folks listening in tonight. So Minnie is so right, folks. So the Dobbs decision effectively in 2022, when that came down by the Supreme Court, that allowed all of the states to do what they want completely, but then also ban it in many states,
Right.
a bunch of different ways. They were very creative. There's
Yes.
20 states out there that have varying types of bans on abortion,
Right.
period. And to that end, and just to so if there are kids watching, please cover their ears, is that um, women have bled out not just on their own living room floor, but in hospitals, because in Texas, um, OBGYNs can't perform abortions, period. And because they will be prosecuted, they will be,
Right.
and not just a misdemeanor, it's a big deal. So doctors cannot keep their Hippocratic oath. So let's just watch that through line for a second.
Yeah.
Dobbs made it so that every state could have an abortion ban if they so choose, and about 20 of them have done it in some form or fashion. And if we don't gain back control of the House, folks, which is my through line here, is that we
Yes.
must get the House back. We must get the House back. We must get the House back, and we will. I mean, yesterday was a very good sign of that, so know that. But the reason we have to get the House back is to prevent and reverse all this activity. So some of the things we'll need to do right away when we get back into power is obviously reverse all the devastating, reverse the Medicaid cuts, reverse the Medicare cuts, reverse all of this kind of destruction of various agencies that were critically important to people's well-being, safety, and healthcare. Right? There's a bunch of things we have to
Including
reverse.
reproductive freedom, like Title X's been cut. That's the nation's family planning safety net program.
Right?
Um, Planned Parenthood has been defunded through the Medicaid cuts, specifically Planned Parenthood. So we're seeing
Yeah.
closures all over the country. I mean,
Right.
HHS programs that support family planning clinics through HHS have been gutted. I mean,
Right.
family planning research has been gutted.
Yeah.
It's broad and intense. It's medication abortion, but it's also been reversing protections and enforcement
Right.
of late laws like EMTALA, which is like the emergency care law that would allow the Biden administration was enforcing to avoid to go after hospitals that were letting patients bleed out. Like
Right.
you go to an
Right.
emergency room because you're having a life and death emergency and you're being refused abortion care, even in a state with a ban, that's a violation of EMTALA, and we're going to go after you. And that's what the Biden DOJ did.
Right.
These are the things we tried to explain to voters in 24, but it was hard to
Yeah.
do.
And we predicted all of this. Let's do a quick deep dive on medication abortion, myth of precedent.
Yes,
So, that medication is proven to be safe for decades now, and it is a preferred
over 20 years. Yeah,
version of it for many doctors because it is very portable, and it is very safe and comfortable for the patient.
that's right.
Talk about this new maneuver with the FDA, what the Trump administration is trying to pull here. I think it's important for people to know, Minnie.
So there's a couple of things. This is actually a really interesting case of collusion, I think, and coordination
Mhm.
by Republican attorneys general from the states, um, Senator Josh Hawley and other anti-abortion Republicans in the Senate, and Trump, RFK, and Marty McCary. So there's multiple tracks in which they're trying to go after, and there's probably going to be another one with Bondi shortly. So at the federal level, uh, some medication abortion has been safe. It's been proven effective, safer than Tylenol is what we used to say, but now RFK is saying that Tylenol's not safe either, which we don't think is an accident, by the way.
Oh,
But we're like, oh, it's not an accident that we've been saying safer than Tylenol. All of a sudden, they're like, Tylenol's not safe. Uh, I digress, but that is part of
that's
the.
it. You're,
They
you're,
they are they are a bunch of wackadoodles. That's all I'll say.
mhm.
Um, so you might remember last year, your listeners might remember, your viewers, that there was a case on medication abortion that wound its way from Texas all the way to the US Supreme Court. And it got kicked back due to standing. It should have never made it that far, but it was originally a case filed by like basically a made up group of, healthcare providers in Texas that said that medication abortion caused harm to them and their patients. So they
Right.
had standing to file this. And the anti abortion movement has, ever since medication abortion was authorized 20 some odd years ago, the anti abortion movement, much like everything else they've done, has been trying to get the FDA to reverse course. And their
Right.
claims are that it's not safe.
Yeah.
Their claims are that it the process was rushed, they didn't have the right data, et cetera, et cetera. We have new findings. So the so after it got kicked down to the states, the case actually just got moved from Texas to Missouri, and the Missouri Attorney General and other Republican generals have
Mm.
intervened. So there is a case working its way through the courts. This time, it will be harder to say they don't have standing.
Yeah.
Um, it will be based on quote unquote the facts.
Right.
The other factor with medication abortion and the case last year was that after a little bit too long of a wait, in my opinion,
Yeah.
Big Pharma finally got involved because they knew if any activist group can come in and put use the courts to get the FDA to reverse authorization of a medication, it would wreak havoc on their industry and their business model, right?
Sure would.
So that was really helpful, actually. They got involved at the Fifth Circuit. It allowed our side to narrow the case and to finally reach the point where we were able to just narrow it down to standing. Okay, so now there's another case, pretty much the same case, working its way back up through the courts, but this time with, you know, Republican state AGs in states with abortion bans saying this medication harms all the things like it's harming our citizens, it's being brought into our states illegally,
Yeah.
and it's not safe. This is important because Josh Hawley's also introduced a study by an anti-abortion activist group that says medication abortion is not safe. Here are all the things we found about medication abortion. Here's the studies. Here's the data. Um, so you've got the same study that is being used in litigation, being used by Josh Hawley in the Senate to
Yeah.
push, protection, to push legislation, and that Martin McCary, the FDA commissioner, is using to say he will do a comprehensive review of medication abortions at safety.
Yeah.
So this is all, and as a former member of Congress, you've seen this all before, right? It's
Yeah.
a wholesale attack, and what it does is it provides legitimacy for junk claims and junk attacks. And they're doing it again. Remember how I said abortion rates are not going down in this country, despite 21 states directly impeding access
Right.
because of medication abortion. So
Yeah.
this is the new frontier. They want to stop access, and that means access in states that have protected medication, that have protected abortion.
Yeah.
So that means that it's also the least expensive, the least invasive. You can have an
Right.
abortion in the privacy of your own home. You don't need
Right.
surgical intervention. So um, that's the fundamental threat. The other possible threat is something called the Comstock Act. There have been
Forgot about the Comstock Act.
I know it's wild, right?
From the
Uh,
1800s, folks, like 1850, right?
yes.
Yeah.
And it was designed to, prohibit pornography or obscene material.
Yeah. God forbid.
So it could be invoked. It's outlined in Project 2025. The anti-abortion activists are all into this theory that you could ban medication abortion from being mailed by invoking the Comstock Act. So that's a Pam Bondi special, and she's on the record having open dialogue with Republican attorneys general about exploring this as an option should it need to happen.
Yeah.
They're not going to stop. They were never going to stop at Dobbs.
That's
This
right.
is the top line.
That's right.
They were never going to stop.
That's exactly right. Well, before I let you go, we have one big topic I want to cover, and that is the amazing coalition of which Reproductive Freedom for All, your
Oh, yeah.
organization, is part of, Abortion Access Now. And the just if you can give us a top line on the work you all are doing, it's really important.
Oh, thank you for letting me talk about this.
Yeah.
So, the election work and the organizing work, Reproductive Freedom for All, we're, 4 million members strong now, which is really exciting. And we do advocacy, mobilization, elections, education. Abortion Access Now is a coalition of 9 major reproductive rights, health, and justice organizations that are national orgs. And we are focused on what we think is something we should have been ready for when we had that brief moment in time,
Hmm.
of the trifecta right after Dobbs and the House and under Nancy Pelosi's leadership, got the damn thing done, passed the
Yep.
Women's Health Protection Act, and then we got stuck in the filibuster fight in the Senate, right? So, we need to be ready for the next round.
Yeah.
But we also know, calling back to something I said earlier, that a right without access isn't enough anymore.
That's
We're
right.
seeing it in real time.
Yeah.
Like, so I could have a right, but if I don't have a clinic to go to, and if I don't have the ability to access care, and if there are restrictions based on my income, based on my age, based on my immigration status, like that's not going to be tenable. And we have this moment right now, Marie, where the majority of Americans are with us. So this is when we have to educate, organize, and mobilize. We can't wait to have the trifecta. We got to do the work now. So when we have the trifecta, we are poised and ready to pass much more bolder legislation to protect abortion rights in this country. So it's us, ACLU, Planned Parenthood, Center for Reproductive Rights, and then 4 of the national reproductive justice organizations. So these are the groups that work at that intersection of social justice, racial justice, and repro. So that's In Our Own Voice, which is the Black RJ Collective,
Yeah.
Latina Institute, National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum, and URGE, which is a youth mobilization organization
Yeah.
on repro. What we're focusing on is agenda that is not just about reestablishing a federal right, although that's going to be huge for us.
Yeah.
It's also about eliminating the Hyde Amendment,
Yeah. Oh
which
my
is
gosh.
a restriction on federal funds for abortion care, which has basically made it impossible for low income women in this country to have access to care. And it's prohibited, federal, like Medicaid funds, for example, from covering abortion. And some states, like I think yours in California and others, have done it with state
Yeah.
funds, but it's been a huge barrier to care.
Yeah.
Eliminating restrictions on based on immigration status, I think we can see very clearly how much we have to reinvest in our immigrant communities and protect them, especially after what we're seeing right now,
Mm.
especially in Chicago right now.
Oh,
And making sure we're eliminating barriers for young people to have access to care and making sure young people are safe to have care. So this is a bigger, bolder vision for care. It's, the Women's Health Protection Act is really important, but we have to go beyond.
mhm.
And when we get that power and we have a federal trifecta that this is why I keep talking about abortion salience.
Yeah.
Who are going to be elected in this trifecta are going to owe their elections to abortion. They better damn take care of it and fix this and make it
Yeah.
a better America and our fundamental freedoms for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know how it goes. We get pushed to the side sometimes. We're never going to let that happen again.
Well, here are the folks. I'm working with a lot of congressional candidates right now. And what I'm communicating to them is that at its broadest level, we are going to have to reverse and reconstitute many laws that were already in place that were reversed or taken away in agencies and federal departments and the whole 9 yards. We also are going to have to be in the business of prevention and insulation. So everything, so like when we're talking about justice for all of the things you just mentioned have to get in the first year. Similarly, we have to make sure that we expand the court so we're never in this position.
Yes.
So all of
Yes.
these insulatory actions we must take very quickly and get a lot done. And not all Democrats like to move that fast, but we are.
No, but that's how we got here,
That's
right?
right.
We had a
We can't be
window.
so genteel. Yeah, it doesn't work.
No, and I think that's what, going back to the election last night. I think that's what Americans are responding to.
Yeah,
They
fighting.
want their leaders to fight,
Yeah, I agree with
and
you.
we can't wait.
That's right. I'm so with you. Before we let you go, two things. Can you share your website so people can donate to Reproductive Freedom for All? If you can share your website.
Well, what I'm gonna say is it cheat. So you can text REPRO, REPRO, to 59791, and you will immediately get a link to join our grassroots organizing team. We won't ask you for money right away, but we're gonna ask you to join our texting team and to,
Oh my gosh.
be activists. And then, of course, if we would like to give, we'd really appreciate that too. But we need you to be in our army. We're
Yeah,
4 million and growing. We're gonna have a huge role in the midterms. And winning back the House is priority number one, but we also have governors and attorneys general, and we have legislatures to flip. And we
right.
have a couple of Senate races that I think got a lot more viable as of last night.
Yeah, I
Some
think so
exciting
too.
ones here.
I think so. That text one more time, Minnie. What's the numbers?
Text REPRO, REPRO, the word repro, to 59791.
Wonderful. Mini Timmaraju, you're amazing. Thank you for all your great
You are
work.
amazing.
Folks, and if you need more information, look at my Substack column from this morning. I talk all about these good folks. But y- we are the army. Minnie said it exactly right. We are that. Nobody's coming to save us. We are going to save us. And
What's
guess
that?
what we did? We saved us last night.
We sure
So,
did.
so we can do it again. Everybody have a wonderful evening. Minnie, it was lovely to see you and keep doing all the good
So good
stuff.
to see you.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
See you.
Bye.